Half-Life is one of the most influential games to ever be released, and that's not hyperbole. Valve Software, the creators of the Half-Life series, along with many other world-renowned series such as Portal, Team Fortress, Counter-Strike, and Left 4 Dead, were pioneers that paved the way for video games as the art form that they are today, and Half-Life was the epicenter of it all, being one of the world's first ever major game releases to create a game that blended storytelling with gameplay, without any rendered cutscenes or long information-dumping text walls. Before Half-Life, most FPSs, such as Doom, Quake, and Duke Nukem, split up levels and gameplay into individual episodes that were cut up with exit doors and results screens. Half-Life, on the other hand, had a whopping 96 levels that all fluidly transitioned between each other. The game was so revolutionary that it not only received over 50 Game of the Year awards and is often still found at least within the top 30 for the best games of all time, but still has an incredibly large and active community even to this day. Yes, not just the whole series, not just Half-Life and its remakes, Half-Life Source and Black Mesa, and not even Half-Life and its expansions. Half-Life itself, the 1998 release, has a huge following as of today. As of writing, I can see 10 different live streamers on Twitch playing Half-Life to over 50 people, and SteamDB is reporting over 500 users in-game. Now, I can talk all day about how great Half-Life is, but I know you folks aren't here just to hear about the game as a whole. More importantly, we should look into what was done to make the game so great, its development. And what better way to look into a game's development than to have a look at what never made it in? And with that, I can finally do my intro. Hello everyone, my name is Wolfclock and welcome to Betafied, the show where we take a look at the unused and cut content of a game and try to figure out what it was, how it worked, and why it was removed from the final product. Today, we're finally going to be taking a dive into my favorite game series, Half-Life, and discuss the origins of the many reused maps for the game's multiplayer deathmatch mode. So, for those of you who are longtime followers of mine, either before or after my dive into A Hat in Time, you'll likely know that I'm crazy about Valve development and cut content, especially for the Half-Life series. So, why on earth has it taken me almost 3.5 years to finally do a Half-Life Betafied? Well, the reason for that is simple. I know more than most people about Half-Life series development content, but I don't know everything. And that distinction is what has kept me away. Well, that and my knowledge of the Valve beta communities. You see, Valve communities are a different breed. My instincts have told me that if I get any minute detail wrong, it is incredibly likely that they will eat me alive. That's why big major topics like the many things we know from Half-Life 2 and the Half-Life Alpha have been deemed off limits for some time now. Frankly, I'm kinda scared of these guys. But with my classes being done for the semester and beta piquing my interest yet again, I thought I'd finally take my first step into Half-Life after all these years. Now, I'm sure the next question you have in your mind is, what do you mean you're just looking at the development of the deathmatch maps? Who cares? And to that, I answer that this is my show and I can do what I want. More importantly, Half-Life's multiplayer had a bit of a bumpy road being designed. Straight from the get-go, when Half-Life was just starting to take shape, multiplayer was on the minds of its creators. However, the Valve of the 1990s was not the Valve we know today. See, back in the day, Valve had this little hindrance to them that prevented them from fully fleshing out every little thing they wanted to have fleshed out that we in the industry call deadlines. Unfortunately for Valve, they didn't receive their infinite revenue through Steam and the ability to release their project whenever they want until the mid-2000s. So the Half-Life we received, although genuinely one of the best games money can buy you, is far from a perfect, flawless masterpiece. Due to time constraints, many features of the original Half-Life had to either be cut or truncated from the final release of the game. This, of course, includes quite a number of levels that were cut at one point or another for the later portions of the game, or, in the cases of a number of levels, were changed from their original form and retrofitted for multiplayer levels. If you've played through Half-Life's single-player campaign, you've probably noticed that from Surface Tension, the 12th chapter, onwards, things begin to feel a bit rushed and disjointed. The non-linearity of the game's level design begins to fall apart as the players push down straight hallways leading into open, empty rooms and warehouses. It becomes incredibly apparent very quickly just how pressed for time Valve was near the end of the game's development cycle, and just how many sacrifices had to be made in the later levels for the game to ship in a released state. So why is this? Well, about a year before the game went gold, Gabe Newell made the executive decision to essentially restart development of the entire game due to how unpolished and disjointed things felt.
In 1997, after an entire year spent in development, Valve decides that Half-Life is missing the mark and gives the game a complete redesign.
We really believed that the right thing to do was to focus on building something that's really good, in spite of the fact that it was going to cost us a lot of time and cost us a lot of money. And also, it's just very stressful to have been working, at that point for a year and say, okay, well, we haven't really gotten as close as we would have hoped by now to the thing that we were wanting to create.
The decision hasn't...
This restart made the game the masterpiece it is known as today. But as a result, the time that was supposed to be spent making the later chapters of the game was instead spent on the already previously completed sections. The results speak for themselves. The start to Half-Life is incredibly solid. However, as a result of this, the ending portions of the game are, well, not. Most people will quote the Zen chapters as the most egregious example, and with good reason too. Zen is incredibly rough in how it plays, with the best level examples barely even scratching the surface of what was planned for the chapter. Why do I bring this up? Well, the chapter's surface tension and Forget About Freeman are other fine examples of levels that had much more planned than what could be seen in the final game. And both of these chapters include leftover assets that will be discussed in today's episode. Before we get to said levels themselves though, we have to talk about Half-Life's multiplayer. Half-Life's multiplayer, as it currently stands, and as it stood when the game initially released, is a fun, fast-paced deathmatch mode that pits players against each other in any of the game's 17 released multiplayer maps. Multiplayer can be traced back as early as the leaked September 8, 1997 0.52 alpha build of the game, predating the earliest public screenshots on PC Gamer by several months. These shots showcase what was likely the first deathmatch map to have been worked on, internally referred to as WhereZ_DM, and later called Stockyard in the final release of the game. Deathmatch was not the only multiplayer mode planned for the game, however. As a matter of fact, there are at least 2 multiplayer game modes cut from the final game due to time constraints. The first of these 2 was cooperative mode that would have seen 2, or possibly more, players working together to complete missions set coinciding with the events of Half-Life. These missions would have been separate campaigns and would have played like short episodes in the same way other previous FPSs had their campaigns work. Although obsolete, Half-Life contains a player spawn entity referred to as Info Player Co-op. According to Sven Manor, Info Player Co-op will function as intended if there are no Info Player Deathmatch entities on a multiplayer map. Aside from the co-op mode, there was another game mode that was planned for release referred to as Loot. This game mode was an experimental mix of cooperative play with deathmatch, putting players in pairs against each other. Here's a quote from level designer Dario Casali on Loot. The game mode was called Loot and started with teams of 2 people who shared items and damage, and they had to hunt around the level for a bag of loot, as well as guns. You could only carry 1 gun per person, and when you found the loot, you had to bring it back to the flagpole area to win the round. Once you died, you were out for that round. Tragically, this game mode, like the cooperative mode, was unable to be finished by the end of Half-Life's development cycle, as it required large and varied levels in order to play as intended. In total, there are 3 deathmatch levels found in Half-Life's multiplayer mode that are confirmed to have been repurposed from other modes. However, in terms of multiplayer, it is known definitively that at least 4 separate maps have been made or prototyped for the 2 cut multiplayer game modes at one point or another. If we take a look here in the 2003 leaked Worldcraft Map Pack's Half-Life 1 map sources, we can see that the internal nomenclature for these maps were HLMP and HLDM. In the final game, the final names are given the names of the maps as opposed to these kinds of names. However, since both of the MP ones are confirmed to have been reused from alternative game modes, we can ascertain that, at some point, there were at least 4 maps that existed, either for loot or for the cooperative mode, due to the naming scheme. What happened to these 2 missing maps? Where'd they go? Are they recycled for other deathmatch maps? Unfortunately, as much as I'd like to answer these questions, all I can tell you guys definitively is the story, or stories, of the maps we have left. But before we take a look at those, let's start off with a map that was pieced together from extra bits of a single-player section cut from the game. This is Data Core. The geometry found in this level draws back to one of the earlier worked on sections of the game, so early even that parts of it are found in their earliest states in the leaked Half-Life Alpha. Early renditions of Half-Life contain a chapter referred to as the Communications Center, a chapter and area which would later become the Lambda complex seen in the final game. The Data Center chapter's geometry and concepts were reused all throughout Half-Life, with the satellite making its way both into uplink and decay, the maintenance hall finding its way into opposing force, and, biggest of all, the concept of a female scientist traitor in the form of the head scientist being recycled into Dr. Mossman in Half-Life 2. However, Data Core is one of the greatest examples of this old chapter being reused. Conveniently, the leaked VMF we have of the map details exactly what each section was, thanks to this map being a semi-rare example of Viz groups not only being employed, but also being well categorized. As you can see here, the level even contains the starting point of whichever map this once was, with the player start in a tucked away corner of the map. This reception area, which is seen in many early game screenshots and footage, houses these two brushes behind the desk, showcasing where this hallway once opened up. Lastly, one of the most important parts that I've been glossing over is the fact that this level contains info nodes. Nodes are points used by the game to help calculate a node graph upon which NPCs can navigate. The existence of a node graph on this map helps showcase that the level is filled with bits once used specifically for singleplayer. Next up, we have the one level that we know was used at one point for the co-op mode of Half-Life. This is Sub-Transit, a level that was known to have been a co-op map before being reformatted for Deathmatch. The level itself is distinct from many other Deathmatch maps in its design. Included in the map is a train that players can use to move all around the complex. Interestingly, there are also a number of things that suggest what may have initially been seen in this map. For starters, there are 4 trip mines found throughout this map in sets of 2 in order to prevent players from crossing without destroying them first. In the source port of the game, these trip mines detonate instantly. However, in the original Half-Life version of the map, they work exactly as anticipated. Furthermore, there is a section here, including 2 damaged electrical boxes and several electrical noises. Much like was seen in the chapter On a Rail, it is possible that there may have been electrical arcs going across these 2 boxes. Like the map I discussed before this one, Subtransit's VMF file is filled with navigational nodes to allow NPCs to move around. This level contains 3 info player co-op spawns, all in relatively the same location as the single player spawn points in this location in the water. I cannot vouch for if this means that the level would have been suited for 3 players or not. Finally, the map has several scripted sequences calling for grunts to storm out as the player picks up the RPG located in this spot. Here's a recreation made from Marfy Black of the sequence in action. Now then, I've shown off a level from single player, and I've shown off a level from a cut multiplayer game mode, so now it's time for a level that was cut from both. Here we have Boot Camp, what is possibly the most interesting level of the bunch. For starters, it is known definitively that Boot Camp was going to be used during the chapter Surface Tension. Specifically, the C2A5 map series would have contained the Boot Camp, and there's a lot of evidence to back this. Let's begin by taking a look at the map geometry and comparing it both to screenshots of it during development, as well as screenshots of a level from the alpha. This is the last level of the C2A4 maps present in the alpha. Don't let this weird ceiling looking thing confuse you. This is supposed to be the sky, and if we look at this place with that context, you'll note that it's a bunker with HECU grunts on the front that leads to the underground. This would have been the point at which the player enters the HECU camp, and when we look at the walls that the player is boxed in by here and compare them to the walls seen in boot camp, you can see that the geometry is the same. Initially, there was going to be an on-site HECU army barrack in Black Mesa, as opposed to them mobilizing from a further off base like they appear to do in the final game, and boot camp is a remnant of this. Here we have some screenshots of the army barracks section of the game, initially referred to as the chapter Topside, which was merged with the chapter named Cliffhanger to form the surface tension we know in the final game. Boot camp was not only originally a section of the single-player game, though. Thanks to the interview I showed earlier with Dario Casali, we know that after the section was cut from the single-player campaign, but before it was turned into the standard deathmatch level it is that we know today, Boot camp was repurposed from its single-player form in order to suit his new game mode, Loot. Tragically, the map file that we have for Boot camp does not contain any leftover bits, either from the single player, such as navigational nodes, nor from the loot version of the level, such as whichever entities may have been used at the time for this loot, or for the specialized player spawns that may have existed. Half-Life was a miracle, specifically in that it was able to be finished in the state that we see it in these days at all. With only about a year left to finish almost the entire game in 1997, anything that didn't have enough already done for it at the time that development restart was put into effect had to be shelved. Tragically, although Half-Life we have today is excellent, there were so many things that we could have seen if the game just had more time to be developed. To see content lost from a game due to developers deeming it not worthwhile is one thing, and is an understandable, if not sometimes sad process of development of a game. However, to see content be removed from a game simply because it did not have enough time to be finished is always a tragedy. In the very least, to place some solace on these sorrowful notions of things that could have made it into an already excellent game, even better, being lost simply due to time constraints. With these map files available publicly, the code for Half-Life 1 being easily obtainable by anyone, and the information about these lost parts of the game's history being known and available to the public, perhaps someday we can see them finally make a return thanks to the modding community. An incredibly special thank you goes out to JC Ewald, the owner and curator of the Valve Archive, for her tremendous work in helping me with my research for this episode. I couldn't have done it without her help, so a link to her channel is in the description. Thank you all very much for watching. I'm excited to start expanding Betafied as a series into the Valve community. If you found this video enjoyable, then I'll know it's the right move to make. If you'd like to see more videos like this, you can let me know in the comments what else you'd like to see. And subscribing and turning on the bell is always an excellent way of staying up to date with these kinds of videos. Don't worry, I don't upload very often. Thank you all very much for your time. This has been Wolfclock, and I will see you all in the next video, whenever it may be.
It's not